please leave a message. So how often do you have a text message conversation during work hours? And you keep toggling back and forth between work, emails, and it doesn't work. Welcome to the Self-Leadership Experiment, where we take an evidence-based perspective on all things organizational behavior. My name is Scott Dust. I'm a management professor, as well as a team member for an HR tech company. I'll be talking with my co-host, Louis DiCarlo, and we'll break down what's real and what's not, and what works and what doesn't work. Thanks for joining the conversation. So the topic of the day, please leave a message. So how often do you have a text message conversation with friends, family, during work hours? So most of us, I'm sure, have been in this situation where there's a dozen or so texts that go back and forth for as long as over a course of 30 minutes or so. And you keep toggling back and forth between work, emails, and text message with family and friends, and it doesn't work. So we know that distractions are bad for our productivity, but can we really ignore our family and friends? Because at work, my colleagues, clients, students, whatever, they totally respect the fact that no matter what, I never let something at least being acknowledged within 24 hours, right? I'll get to this when I can, et cetera. But this doesn't really seem to work with family and friends, right? It's personal, so it feels rude to not respond. But my thinking is, why not a compromise? What if we promise to do all of our non-work responses during a specific window of the after work evening hours? Is that really that bad? So this aligns with a philosophy that I really like, which is called chunking versus sprinkling. When we can chunk together common tasks, we're more likely to be focused on that specific task at hand and then more efficient throughout our entire workday. The challenge, though, the downside is that not everyone will be available when we're ready for that scheduled chunk of communication, right? So somebody texts you early in the morning and then finally you're ready at 5 o'clock. But in that situation, then perhaps it necessitates a text to say, hey, when can we catch up and officially connect a little bit better? So it's really hard, but ideally, we stay focused when we need to be focused, and we communicate with family and friends when we want to communicate with family and friends. But I don't know, do you experience this as well, or do you just turn your phone off? What do you do?
Yeah. No, I think this right here is, and almost everyone has one of these days, right? I mean, how can you manage your productivity? How does everyone time manage? Mm-hmm. Today, knowing that anyone can reach you at any moment, and right. You technically can respond to anyone immediately. Yeah. I think this is something that's taken place more so in the last 10 years, maybe. Not that the technology wasn't available before that, but like modern day texting is nonstop now, right?
Yeah.
I think this is something that we know exists, but I don't know that it's necessarily addressed. Or how do you teach this? What is being taught? How are we adjusting our distractions of today so that we can properly manage our time and be productive nowadays, right? I mean,
yeah, I'd argue in general, not very well. I feel like some people do it very well for just the work domain itself, right? Like there's some people that recognize the importance of deep work, especially knowledge worker types like ourselves, right? Like we need longer stretches of time to do more than just the surface level, quick responses, scheduling meetings, answering quick questions. We need thoughtful, deep work that we can really get our head into for 30 minutes at minimum at a time, if not as long as an hour or 2 hours. And some people are good at saying, okay, I'm going to block off time where I'm just doing that deep work. And then, I'll take interruptions as they come whenever they want, right? So, communication used to just be through email at work. And then eventually the direct messages started to creep in with Slack and Teams. And I do think that those are helpful for kind of like quickly getting things accomplished. And so people are good at managing those different types of communique. But it's totally ignored the fact that, the phone's bringing in two different things. It's bringing in work messages as well as personal messages. And so I don't feel like the conversation is being had at all about what could we be doing with family and friends. Here's an example. I'm about to have a colleague soon who is talking about, how she gets all of her deep work done. And as a writer, she literally texts her husband and says something along the lines of, I'll be in deep work mode for 2 hours. And they've had a conversation that basically signals to him, do not text me unless it's an emergency. Do not call me unless it's an emergency. I've had other people who've said, I purposefully turn my my phone off, and if it's an urgent message or whatever, then call my work phone. And if I see your number pop up, then I'll take it, or something along those lines.
Now, I remember when I was right out of college, read this book. I think it was called like The 4-Hour Work Week. I think it's Timothy Ferriss, right? And in that moment, it was relevant to address when to check your email every day. Mm-hmm. And generally, without remembering exactly what the book said, it said check it a few times a day, but that's it. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't need to be having our email open and checking it every 10 minutes.
That's right.
And now it's, we don't need to be having our phones in our hands and checking it every, the data. What is the data? How often are we doing this?
Yeah.
We do it now subconsciously, right? And
sick, yeah.
I love when Apple, I think the users are starting to help people deal with this more and giving people more tools. For example, every Sunday at whatever time, I see how often I'm on my phone for the week. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm usually at like 5 hours-ish. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm on my phone for 5 hours a day.
It's crazy.
It is crazy. But I think being intentional about this, right? I mean, if you have something to do, you need to take this and either turn it off, you need to silence it, you need to find the mechanism that works for you so that you're not picking it up. Yeah. I love the fact that you made that reference in deep work mode. Yeah. That's a great communication, right? Because people need to know, and you need to be able to communicate that. And we've got to be able to find more ways that everyone's doing that. Yeah. I noticed that you can turn notifications off now on these a little bit easier, and they make it more accessible. Yeah. I think that's another tool to use, is just, sometimes I'm texting with someone and I see, oh, so-and-so's notifications are off. Oh,
good for them.
I won't hold it against you if you don't text me back.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think there's more tools available than we realize within our phones and within our email systems to kind of create a moat around what we're doing, or to hold the communication for a certain time. Part of it's self-discipline. Part of it is using the tools at our disposal. And a big part of it as well is communicating with our partners or our family members that are regularly trying to communicate with us. I think I never really said it, but I think my family members and friends eventually kind of realized that I'm actually never going to text back unless it's between the 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock window. And then after that, you're just never going to hear a response from me. And people just probably notice that trend. And, I've had conversations with my partner. Kate knows that, you only text me if it's an emergency. Right. And we just kind of have that language for it, but it's just not as proactive as what it could be. And here's another one with friends. Like, when a friend texts you or calls you and like you haven't talked to them in a long time, like my friends, like you're in Texas and I'm in Cincinnati, right? Like, it's hard to connect. And so anytime you see those messages come in, you want to respond to it because you don't want them to, you don't want to miss that opportunity. I've had a friend that lives in a different state who texted me and said, what's your availability for this day and time? Like, it was a meeting, right? Like, just to have our catch up call. And he's like, sorry for the formality, but it's the only way busy professionals are ever going to catch up these days. I was like, yeah, he's right. That's probably true.
Yeah, I wonder if I'm sure there's all sorts of studies to answer these questions, but as much as these phones have helped us do our day-to-day jobs and expanded our availability and flexibility and ability to multitask, is it being a net distraction, or is it positive or more negative?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know, man.
It's all, it's good. It helps you stay in touch, right? It helps create that, but eventually you got to still have, there's some great work on like friendship networks. And, a lot of them talk about like the pattern of communication that has to happen in order to maintain that connection. These text messages, they're good for maintaining, but if you don't have that longer term engagement, whether it's face-to-face or a long phone conversation or whatever, within a certain period of time, eventually it starts to fade away and they start to move to your periphery friend network. So we need to be, setting aside the time and not just, worrying about this smaller, low-hanging fruit text messages. Okay. Very good. Thanks everybody for joining. For more resources on bridging the gap between science and practice for all things organizational behavior, go to scottdust.com, where you can subscribe to the monthly newsletter, as well as find additional evidence-based insight through YouTube, social media, and podcasts. Thanks for being here.